The logic of self-hatred protectors, understanding timing, repair, and ethical decision-making in parts-based trauma therapy. Hi, I'm Sarah, licensed professional counselor in the state of Michigan, and I told you that we would continue in on this particular information. So today we're going to talk about one of the most misunderstood dynamics in trauma and dissociation work. Self-hatred as a protector strategy. So this is not a discussion about where self-hatred came from, not a discussion about what happened to someone, and it's not a discussion about self-concept, shame narratives, or distorted beliefs. What I want to get into today is a discussion about mechanisms, the mechanism behind, specifically why cruelty can function as protection, why it persists even when it is harmful, how it begins to relinquish control, how therapists can recognize readiness, how therapy can unintentionally make it worse, how repair happens after escalation, how to differentiate escalation from destabilization, and finally, how to make an ethical decision when those two begin to overlap. This is not a compassion-first model. It is not an insight-based model. It is a nervous system-based and ethics-based framework. Self-hatred protectors are not operating from emotional meaning. They're operating from threat containment logic. Their mandate is not to help someone feel whole, valued, or fulfilled. Their mandate is much narrower and much more urgent. It's to prevent psychological collapse, prevent emotional flooding, prevent exposure to danger. Cruelty is not the goal. Control is the goal. One of the most important principles of the nervous system is predictability. From a threat management perspective, predictable pain is safer than unpredictable pain. Known suffering is safer than unexpected vulnerability. Don't be surprised if you hear a cat in the background. So we talk about self-attack creates pain that is internally generated, time-limited, familiar, controllable. From the protector's perspective, if pain is inevitable, it's safer to administer internally and not be blindsided. This is why cruelty persists even when insight is present. The system is not choosing pain over health. It is choosing predictability over uncertainty. Self-hatred also serves as a second function. Emotional compression. Emotions like grief, longing, hope, and attachment expand emotional bandwidth. They increase vulnerability. They increase complexity. They demand connection. Self-hatred does the opposite. It narrows experiences, collapses the emotional field, replaces complexity with rigidity. Shame and cruelty are constricting states, and constriction feels safer than expansion in a system that cannot trust. Self-hatred is not expressive, it's containing. Another critical function is internal surveillance. Self-hatred often operates inward hypervigilance. It is to scan the self. If I stay hard on you, nothing worse will happen. This is not self-destruction, it's preventable regulation. And finally, self-hatred often functions to prevent hope. Hope increases risk. Attachment increases exposure. Trust increases dependency. If the system believes it is fundamentally unworthy, it is less likely to reach, risk, or expect attachment. From a protector's logic, if you never believe you deserve more, then you can't be devastated. This is not permissive, it's risk management. So the question becomes, how does a protector go and let this go? Protectors do not release control because they're convinced. They release control because they observe safety. Self-hated protectors are empiricists. They track emotional spikes, dissociation, loss of functioning, and relational fallout. They loosen only when they observe that vulnerability occurs and the system survives. This is why reassurance does not work. This is why affirmations backfire. Protectors do not respond to promises. They respond to evidence. The first shift is not kindness, it's precision. Instead of global identity statement like, I'm broken, the system begins to move toward accurate descriptions like, something feels unsafe right now, or this is distress, not danger. Naming narrows threat. Precision reduces the need for domination. Self-hatred is not removed, it's replaced. Containment strategies, structure, pacing, grounding, predictability begin to do the job that cruelty used to. Release happens in increments. The self attack arrives later. It lasts for shorter periods. It loses intensity. It becomes observational rather than punitive. This is not resistance, it's testing. Compassion comes last. For many systems, compassion is destabilizing early on. It increases grief, longing, and openness. Protectors interpret that as danger. Compassion becomes safe only after regulation is reliable. Therapists, you can recognize readiness when protectors begin to explain themselves rather than simply act. When self attack narrows in scope, when the client can tolerate therapist neutrality, when distress revolves without punishment, when the protector expresses fatigue without panic. And this is where therapy often can go wrong. One common misstep is treating self hatred as a cognitive distortion. Insight without containment increases threat. Protectors escalate when their control mechanisms is challenged prematurely. Another misstep is premature compassion. Compassion equals exposure. Without safety, cruelty returns stronger. Another is sliding against the protector. Even subtle opposition increases polarization. Protectors escalate when framed as harmful rather than necessary. Another is focusing on meaning without function. Understanding why self hatred exists does nothing if nothing replaces what it does. Another is underestimating post session vulnerability. Escalation often occurs after session, not during then. Containment must extend beyond the therapy room. When escalation occurs, it is not a failure, it's a protective signal. Something exceeded capacity. Repair begins with stabilization, not insight. Regulation first, orientation first, grounding first. Repair continues by naming the protector's increased workload. This part stepped in to hold things together. Recognition restores coherence. Then identify where overexposure occurred, not blame. Calibration. Reduce load before requesting change. Relief precedes relinquishment. Reestablish therapist reliability. Consistency communicates safety. Now we must differentiate escalation from true destabilization. Protector escalation is regulation under strain. Destabilization is loss of regulation. The question is not intensity, it's organization. Escalation is coherent. Destabilization is fragmented. Escalation hurts, but functioning largely remains intact. Destabilization involves loss of functioning. Escalation challenges the therapist. Destabilization distorts reality. Escalation responds to pacing. Destabilization persists. Protectors are often risk adverse, and sometimes these two overlap. This is an ethical gray zone, so to speak. Ethics is not determined by intensity, it's determined by risk, capacity, and reversibility. Consent without capacity is insufficient. When capacity is compromised, stabilization overrides autonomy. This is duty of care. Protectors are stakeholders, not obstacles. Escalation is a risk signal. Non-malevolence requires pacing, not avoidance, and not pushing through. Therapist self regulation is a clinical variable. Consultation is ethical responsibility. Sometimes the frame must change. Increased support is ethical adaptation, not failure. Ethical pausing is required when self hatred shifts towards self harm, dissociation compromises safety, or functional declines despite pacing. Pausing is containment, not regression. The series has not argued that self hatred is good. It has argued that it is coherent. Self hatred protectors do not step back because they are persuaded to do so. They step back because safety is demonstrated. Ethical trauma therapy is not defined by depth or bravery. It is defined by timing, containment, and responsibility. When those conditions are met, cruelty becomes unnecessary and protectors release control without violence to the system. So, something to keep in mind. Please understand protectors have a vital role, and it is really difficult, yes, when the rest of the system either fears the protector parts, is angry with the protector parts, doesn't understand the protector parts. But there is a way to move past, but you cannot take something and replace it with nothing. You have to demonstrate that there is, in fact, a reason for not the protector to go away or to stop having a job, but to maybe shift in the duties that it has to the rest of the system. So, any questions, feel free, please drop them in. And we will continue to have, of course, more in depth in looks at dissociation identities, treatment, what that looks like from a therapist perspective. Thank you. Bye.